Hi, welcome to The Art of Writing Nonfiction and Getting Published. Hi, I'm Trish Wilkinson, co-author of Brain Stages, How to Raise Smart, Confident Kids and Have Fun Doing It. And I am secretary for the Central Oregon Writers Guild, and I am an editor and writing coach for other writers. So we're going to talk a little bit about writing craft in nonfiction and how to get that writing craft published. So there's all kinds of nonfiction. In fact, nonfiction is actually published more than fiction. And the thing that's really exciting about nonfiction is there are so many places to get published now. We'll talk about that a little later. But there are blog posts, there are writers' websites, and I'll show you a little bit about that later. There are, and then there are the regular full-length books, there are magazines online, there are print magazines. You get the idea. There is so much, and content writing. You can write content for other people. So there are so many opportunities for nonfiction writing. And it turns out that a lot of nonfiction writing, a lot of the craft is very similar to fiction writing. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, you can use for fiction or nonfiction. And we are going to start with, so I'm going to just read a couple of examples, and I'm going to read examples from normal people, like some of the things that I've written and some of my clients, because I want you to see that I had thought about reading from John Green's book and several other, Stephen King, several other big authors, and I thought, or literary, but I thought a lot of times that's what we do in these workshops. And I want you to see that everyone, if we hone our writing craft, we really can get published, and you really can hear some great writing by just regular people who come to the Guild. So the first one I'm going to show you is a magazine article. I wrote the cover article for San Diego Magazine, Family Magazine. Actually, I wrote two of these articles. And this is the cover article called Sesame Street Friends Bring Excitement to San Diego. And this is about how they put a whole section for little kids in at SeaWorld. And this is the article to introduce that brand new section of SeaWorld. So it starts off, as kids, how many of us feared the monsters lurking in the closet or under the bed at night? Luckily, Grover and Cookie Monster arrived on Sesame Street to show kids that not all monsters have to be scary. So that's how, so we started off by telling a story, because people love story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Here's another one, starts with a story. It's actually called, it's a parenting magazine called Bring It On, Mom-Inspired YouTube Challenges by Cheryl McGuire. In an attempt to break the deafening teen silence during breakfast, I began a conversation. So I saw a meme, laughter erupted from my teen twins. It's pronounced meme, not mem. You sound like Elle's mom, who said Mimi, my teen daughter corrected me. Just for the record, I'm not alone. There is an entire article written about how to pronounce meme. Anyway, you get the idea. There's a voice and a tone and story to start whatever nonfiction thing you're going to do. In Brain Stages, and there's a lot of showing. We got to actually see a scene. Now, this is a how-to book. So it's not that you can never tell. We're going to talk about the difference between showing and telling, and giving you some really simple, cool tools to use to increase those skills. But I want you to see that some telling is necessary, especially in a how-to book. So, the paragraph I'm going to read you is the beginning of a chapter called Useful Stuff About Brains. A brain makes up only 2% of our body weight, but it gobbles up 20% of the energy produced and requires even more when we read or solve problems. An average adult brain weighs about 3 pounds, is about the size of a large cauliflower, contains mostly water, and has a consistency of a bowl of Jell-O. Why do you need to know these things? So when your child asks if there's an elf controlling things inside his brain, you can set him straight. So you get an idea that nonfiction has to have a voice. You have to pay attention to whoever your audience is that you're writing for to make it digestible and usable for them. And then there are all kinds of lists and games and things and stories, lots of stories in here. So using a lot of the same kind of descriptive skills. But it's the same in, for example, this is, you've probably met Jack Mullen. Jack Mullen wrote this book. He's one of the members of the Guild. This has been a best-selling book on the bestseller list several times. And it's called You Can't Make This Stuff Up, My 30 Years as Captain in the Bering Sea. And he started off using passive voice. And we're going to talk about passive voice versus active voice very soon. But it was, I was standing on the shore waiting for the Columbia, which is the ship, and just like not a lot to see. And this is how it ended up when it was fleshed out and we were using active verbs. Weary from flying to this remote outpost in the Aleutian Islands, I jam my hands in my jeans pockets. My coat inflates in the gusts and I shiver. Appearing through sea spray, the Columbia, pride of the fleet, turns into the bay. The fishing boat is my second home. I've spent 3 good years on board. So you get a whole picture of what's going on. And each one of these stories has a leadership theme. So the theme of this book all the way through are different qualities of a leader. And each story illustrates that quality of a leader. So nonfiction has multiple layers, and every single one of these short stories follows a story structure that I'm going to show you in a little bit. Okay, but it's also the same in fiction. And so I'm going to read a little bit, or just the first paragraph of Linda Berry's book. This is called The Killing Woods. It's the first in a mystery series. I think the 4th book is coming out fairly soon, or she's working on the 4th book. Anyway, Linda was a traditionally published author and an independent publisher. Did not work well for her, so she bought back her rights, figured out how to advertise on Amazon and get on some newsletters and stuff, and she makes $3,000 to $5,000 a month on her books, just selling her books while she's working on her next book. So, and that's after expenses with advertising and stuff. And she starts her book, The Killing Woods, with Bailey's low, insistent growls woke Anne from a dreamless sleep. She found herself sprawled on the overstuffed easy chair in the living room, feet propped on the ottoman, drool trickling down her chin. Half opening one eye, she peered at the antique clock on the mantel, 11 p.m. So it already starts just a little spooky, and this is a mystery, and there's the Killing Woods. There's something going to go on in those woods pretty soon, right? So, but she uses a lot of the same techniques that I read, and when we edited this book together, same kind of thing, and she's a lovely writer. But we did a lot of the same kind of fleshing out and cleaning up that I'm going to show you as far as forms of be. And she's since done this on her subsequent books, are great too. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to talk about the how-to for show, don't tell, or show versus tell, because writers all the time we're told to show rather than tell, except that nobody necessarily tells us how to do that. So right now I'm going to show you some really just things that are going to click in your head that are going to help you show versus tell and flesh out your writing. So the first thing is use active voice. Instead of using words like was and were, which are forms of be, use active voice, which are doing words is what we used to say. Active words, words that show characters moving, it's movement. So here we go. The difference between the guitar the guitar was played by a homeless man. So you kind of get an idea, not much of a picture, but watch how much more active this makes it with this teeny tiny tweak to just say the homeless man played a guitar. All of a sudden you can actually see the homeless man with the guitar, right? Okay, and here's another example to use these words instead of is and are, or was and were, depending on if you're in present or past tense. The woman was hesitant to open the email versus the woman hesitated to open the email. So in the second one, you can actually see the woman sitting there and hesitating before she opens her email. And it's just such a small tweak, but it'll make your writing so much stronger. Here's another one. She was angry at me. Okay, she was angry at me. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know anything about her character. But if I add a couple of details, it'll make the sentence a little longer. But if I use active verbs, then I'm going to see a whole different picture. And I'm going to get to know a little bit about this character. So the next one is, she slapped her hand across my mouth and yelled at me to shut up. Well, we get she's angry, right? But we showed that she's angry. It could have been she clenched her teeth, turned around and walked out. So we can still see she's angry, but it's a very different kind of anger. And the next one, Rhonda was going to the store, but she wasn't sure what she was supposed to get. So we don't know if Rhonda's on a bike or in a car or what she's doing and what's going on. We just know she's going to the store and she's not sure what she's supposed to get. In the next one, we're going to change it to active verbs and get a little more clear. Rhonda rolled into the parking lot and realized she forgot her grocery list. So now we know why she doesn't know what she's supposed to get. And she rolled in, but did she roll in a bike or a car or a scooter? So once you get a little more comfortable with using other words that show action instead of was, so there's more clarity, we're going to have you get a little more specific. So, so the next one says, Rhonda twirled a red curl around her finger as she rolled into the parking lot in her SUV. It dawned on her that she left the grocery list on the kitchen counter, and she slapped the steering wheel. So we didn't say Rhonda was frustrated. We showed Rhonda being frustrated. She's just kind of zoning. We show her zoning at first. She's in her SUV. We can see her sitting there. Then all of a sudden we see it comes to her that she forgot a grocery list and she slaps the steering wheel, so we can see her frustration instead of saying she was frustrated, because she was frustrated is telling. Having her slap the steering wheel is showing. I hope that's starting to create more clarity for you. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is I want you to pause this video give yourself 5 or 10 minutes, set the timer. I would set the timer just so that you don't, just go off and running. I want you to write about a time where all of a sudden, like Rhonda did, you thought of something, or it could be more important than just realizing you forgot something important. It could be how you had an epiphany. All of a sudden something came to you and you realized something new for the first time. But it can be just generally anything. I want you to pause the video, give yourself 5 or 10 minutes to write. Either write on your computer so it'll be easy to revise, or if you're writing with a pen and paper, make sure you skip lines, because if you don't skip lines, you're not going to have any room to revise. And once you write on this thing and we do another little bit on how to change things, I want you to you're gonna need that space. So skip lines if you're writing. Okay, so here we go. Ready? Pause the video and then come back. Okay, well, so welcome back. Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna look a little bit more at this screen share, at this show versus tell, to the next part. And I'm going to show you a little trick to hone your showing skills using active verbs. I want you to highlight everywhere, either highlight on your computer or just underline. If you have a highlighter handy, that's great. Or just underline it if you wrote with a pen and pencil and you don't have a highlighter. I want you to underline all the words that are passive voice. Was, were, is, are, depending if you're present or past tense. I want you to underline those words, and so you can see how many times you have them. If you've already been practicing this for a while, you probably don't have as many. And if you only have a couple, no big deal. You can just work on fleshing it out and adding a little more detail, just like showing us how a person is angry or frustrating, just adding some more detail. But if you have quite a few wases or wers or whatever, or have been, that's another one we use a lot, have been or had to, or whatever those are, I want you to underline them and see and pause. So pause the video again, underline those things, and see if you can rework the language a little bit, rewrite the language, revise, so that you can revise with more action, so that you can, when you read it out loud to yourself, you can see more what's happening in the story. And wherever possible, use past tense, like the homeless man played the guitar, instead of the other one. The homeless man was playing the guitar. You get the idea. Okay, so pause the video and then come back. Okay, well, welcome back. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to describe things using action verbs and specific nouns and occasional adjectives. But I want you to flesh out the scene more by giving us more detail about what's going on. So not on your writing yet. Let's talk about it first, and then we'll do that in a second. So the first example is the old man sat on the bench hoping his bus would come soon. So we see an old man on the bench, and it's not terrible, right? I mean, that's a start. But then we can add more details about it and make it 2 sentences instead of 1, and just add some more details with active verbs. The Vietnam vet slouched and wheezed on the bench, his face a wrinkled labyrinth etched from decades of smoking. Every few seconds, he glanced down the street, anxious for the 29 bus to Porterville to arrive. So now we have a much more fleshed out picture of him, and we wonder, who is this character and where is he going and what significance does he have to this story? So the next example, I was running down an alley when I noticed someone going into the theater through the back door, and I wondered if that could be my escape route. So is it terrible? No, we can see somebody running down an alley. We can see that she watches somebody, or he, whatever, it's just I don't think there's any gender going on there. And that she's thinking maybe she should go in the back of the theater. Or we could tighten it and flesh it out a little bit by saying, I scrambled down an alley and saw a guy stealing into the theater through the back entrance. So I caught the door and slipped in behind him. I hope you're starting to see the difference on how to just tighten your language. These little teeny tweaks in your writing will make such a huge difference. And another thing that makes writing just way more, just way more fleshed out and makes the reader feel like they're involved in the story is when you use sensory details. What something smells like, looks like, sounds like. So the example here is, my mother was on the couch watching TV, dressed in the same clothes she had been wearing for a week. Is that terrible? No, it's not terrible. We get a picture there, but we can get a much more fleshed out picture of what's really going on with this mom if we add a few details and use active words and descriptive words. So my mother slumped on the couch, her glazed eyes fixed on the TV, oblivious to her stench of a week's worth of sweat and alcohol. So it just gives you a much greater picture of what's going on. What was her mom just, anyway, you get the idea. Okay, in past tense, we already talked a little bit about this, but this one little teeny tweak makes such a big difference. We rode our bikes 30 miles an hour down Juniper Road versus past progressive. We were riding our bikes down 30 miles an hour down Juniper Road. So whenever you can use past tense instead of past progressive and take out the was, it'll vastly tighten your writing. I know it seems like a teeny thing, but honestly, it really affects the flow of your writing. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video right now, and I want you to read what you wrote again in that 5 or 10 minutes, however long you paused it before. I want you to pause it and see if you can add just small details that can flesh out the scene, that whatever happened to you in that nonfiction scenario that you're talking about, where you can remember some other details and flesh out that scene just a little more. So pause the video, go to writing, and when you're ready, come back and see me. Okay, so welcome back. The next thing we're going to work on are action tags in dialogue. And this is really important because if you show movement within the scene, a lot of times when you use said going back and forth, or characters just talk and there's no movement, then we lose sight of the scene. It just looks like two fuzzy heads in your mind. Whereas if you show some movement and you show some of the setting while your characters are in dialogue, real fiction or nonfiction, then it gives us a picture in our mind that we can see. And so here's the example. Oh, one more thing. Every time a new speaker speaks, there has to be a new paragraph. You go to the next line. You're never supposed to have two characters, whether fiction or nonfiction, talking in the same paragraph. Oh, as an editor, that drives me crazy when I see that. There is no editing book that says, like I use primarily Chicago Manual of Style is my framework to make sure that I get everything consistent and right, especially for nonfiction. But and AP, they use AP for American Psychology. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but for fiction. So we have specific sources for editing, and worldwide actually, but especially in this country, those are the main two. And every time you go, when a speaker changes, you go to the next line. So here we go. So we're lost, said Brad. Oh, and you said if you're going to use a dialogue tag, don't say mumbled or rumbled or guffawed or any of those things. You said. It is the invisible action tag. And I'll show you how to use it as little as possible in a second. But right now we're just going to use said for our dialogue tag. We're lost, said Brad. Let me see your cell phone, said Trudy. It's dead, said Brad. Can't you remember anything? The 7-Eleven, the donut shop? I'm supposed to memorize a town on a one-time drive-through, said Trudy. Everything looks different in the dark. Notice how they're on a different paragraph. The next line, every single time one or the other of them speaks. But here we go. We have action tags instead of dialogue tags. So we start with Brad stopped on the sidewalk. All of a sudden you can see someone named Brad standing on the sidewalk. We're lost. Trudy noticed a street sign and held out her hand. Let me see your cell phone. It's dead. Can't you remember anything? The 7-Eleven, the donut shop? I'm supposed to memorize the town on a one-time drive-through. Everything looks different in the dark. Notice for the last two lines, I didn't designate who was talking because we as the reader, we already knew. We would see the back and forth conversation, especially if you're going to the next line every time somebody speaks. The reader knows that it's the other person talking. So the dialogue tags don't get in the way. So note, occasionally you will need to use a dialogue tag, so don't get fancy. Use said to clarify the speaker's identity without distracting the reader. Because distracting or confusing a reader is the kiss of death. It pulls them out of the story, and you don't want to do anything to take somebody out of your story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Okay. And then balance your writing between showing and telling. And how do you do that? You read your writing out loud. Now, have you ever been like in a library or somewhere where you don't want to read out loud? I'm going to show you a trick. You always read your writing out loud because you hear things with your voice that you don't see when you're writing. You don't see when you're reading or writing. So I want you to cup your hand around your ear like this. And if you whisper, My guess is that you couldn't really hear me, except I have a microphone right here. But I can hear me because I have my hand cupped around my ear. So you can read your writing out loud with your hand cupped around your ear like this and use what I call a whisper, your whisper phone. And when you whisper whatever your writing is, you can still hear it and correct things, even in your if you're in a public place where you're not supposed to be making noise, or you'd be embarrassed by people listening to you. It gives you privacy. So the next time you're in a situation when people are around and you need to read your writing out loud to hear how it sounds and catch things that you wouldn't have caught otherwise, just cup your hand around your ear for your whisper phone. Okay. So read your writing aloud, share your work in a writer's group. In fact, when we do the workshop on Saturday, we're going to have 3 hours. So a lot of these things that we're talking about now, we're actually going to practice, and then we're going to read and share in small groups and workshop each other's writing in small groups for that 3 hours online. So we would love for you to come and join us to use a lot of these things that we're working on today. And you might even meet another writer or two that you can share your work with regularly and have a writing buddy, because writing buddies are great for accountability and moving your writing forward. Another thing to do is to be able to balance your writing is take a class or a workshop, kind of like what you're doing now and what we're talking about on Saturday, the July 25th from 8 to 11. And another thing is hire a writing coach. It takes a while to develop craft. And David, where did I put his book? Oh, here it is. The Pale-Faced Lie. This book took us a long time for me to coach. It took us like a year to write this book together because he has a really intense story. And he had never written a book before. And he had written a lot of papers and technical things, but didn't know how to really tell a story. So it took a long time to help him be able to flesh it out. But now he has a lot of these skills after this first book, and he is writing his second book that will be, I don't know when it'll be published. It'll probably be another year because the publishing industry is very slow. Okay. But you get the idea. If you hire, and I'm not saying you have to hire me. I have no time in my life until at least mid to late November, or maybe even December. So, but we have other writing coaches in the Guild and other editors, like Mike Cooper is really good at, anyway, you get Denise, Hughes Lewis, Hughes Lewis, sorry, Denise. I can't talk. Anyway, there are other people in the Guild, and you can look on the website and ask around if you're interested in actually hiring a coach to help you on whatever project you're working on. Okay, so there's that. Stop share. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is story structure. And at the class in a couple weeks, I'm actually going to send all of these things that I'm showing you on the screen. I'm going to send them to you in an email so that you have them ahead of time, so that you already have those tools by the time we're working on the workshop, so you can really participate in that three-hour experience. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to show you. And some of you have seen this before because it's my very favorite. So Larry Brooks, the author of Story Engineering, Mastering the 6 Core Competencies of Successful Writing. It doesn't sound sexy, story engineering, when writing is supposed to be artistic, right? But there really are certain competencies, there really are certain structure to story that makes a huge difference. So you hear people saying, oh, I'm a pantser. I just write it down. I will tell you that usually takes people a lot longer, unless they're a Stephen King who grew up reading a bazillion books and came from a whole family of writers and just naturally writes in that structure. But most of us don't. Most of us need a little help. And this is a story structure that is a whole story on one page. It's his whole section on story structure in this book, condensed to one page. in this graphic organizer, which is awesome. So it talks about part one, what goes in part one, the setup, the inciting incident, something happens, and just the beginning of the story. You start off, this is what started in the beginning, and just like Jack on the, just like Jack on getting onto the, waiting for the fishing boat. So that's just his normal setup. And he is getting on a boat that you would find out in the next paragraph has a new skipper. And you think, okay, that'll be fine, a new captain. But one thing leads to the other. It gets worse and worse. So the first plot point is, and it's this buildup that this captain is terrible. He's disrespectful. He's sloppy. He's, got all this stuff going on. And then the first plot point, they're not putting up the crab pots correctly. And there are these huge crab pots that, weigh 750 pounds empty or something. And they're not put on right, and they're starting to sag. And anyway, so the first plot point is they end up in danger for their lives. And so it's, what's their response? How are they going to respond? Well, they try to deal with the captain. The captain doesn't know what he's doing. He has a terrible attitude. So the midpoint is Jack has to make a decision and lead the rest of the crew that he's going to help them be able to fix the problem. They work for a whole bunch of hours, and it talks about, anyway, the point is this whole story structure is on one page, and every single one of Jack's stories, all 10 of them, have basically this structure. In Paleface Lie, this is a memoir. It is nonfiction, and it basically has that structure. And even if it's not chronological, if you've ever seen the movie 500 Days of Summer, where it jumps all over the place, in that whole movie, chronologically, it'll say, 500 Days of Summer, day 12, day 1, day 52, day 136, day 423, but it still follows that structure that's on the computer right now for these 4 parts, and what the first plot point is and the midpoint. And we'll get more into that in the next workshop, in the longer workshop. And I'll send this to you so that you can see it. And there's also, look at that, there's also a blank one. So if you're working on a story now, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's long form, like Paleface Lie or The Killing Woods, or it's short form, like, David short stories, or even a magazine article. Basically, if you fill this in, magazine article is a little different. If it's a how-to article or something, it's not going to have that kind of plot point, all of that stuff. It's for narrative nonfiction and for fiction. Narrative nonfiction, you're just going to start with a really cool opening and relate it to your life. And then you're going to say, these are the 5 ways to communicate better with kids. Try these 5 things to communicate better with kids, or to help them develop a healthy emotional quotient, or, whatever you're writing about. Or these 5 foods will boost your brain power, or whatever. But if you're writing a story of any kind, narrative, nonfiction, or fiction, and you can fill in these spaces for your own story. And what I would do is I'd fold it in half and fold it in half again, so I had all 4 parts, and I could use the back of the paper as well. Because when I've tried to be a pantser, things get off kilter. I can't just naturally at 25% make sure I have the first plot point. And the midpoint in the middle of the book, when I don't even know where it's going to end or where it's going to go yet. Whereas if I can just write in quick notes, so I know basically what the theme is, basically what the through line will be, basically how I'm going to set it up and the main characters and how I set up the situation and what's going to happen, what the inciting incident is that's going to start the action, and what the first plot point is. It's going to send the main character on their journey. And all of those things, if I can just write little notes and bullets, so I have a place where I'm going, then it saves a boatload of time. So much time, just to have a little bit of a structure to know where your story is going. And it'll take different turns. It doesn't have to be exactly in the same place. but at least you know where the parts are about supposed to be and what's supposed to happen in each part, so that you don't end up with a mess when you're done and total confusion and not knowing how to fix it. Okay, so there is that. Okay, so hopefully you've gotten some new tools that you can use and to improve your writing. And once you hone your writing a little better, and you feel like it's much stronger, and we're just going to talk about kind of the summary of that. Here we go. The first thing you're going to do once you finish a short piece, memoir or sample chapters for, you know, a how-to book or something like this. The difference between fiction and nonfiction is if you're going to query an agent for fiction, you have to write the whole manuscript. You can't write a fiction story and have only part of it done and then query an agent. They want the whole thing done so they can see if it's a story they can sell and even, you know, help you with to make it saleable. And they have to be really intrigued because they get a bazillion books or a bazillion queries. So for a fiction piece or a memoir is another thing that you have to have the whole thing done already because it's your story. And then they may want to help you flesh it out or, you know, do some other things, do some other tweaks. They may do some more editing once a publisher gets the story, but they want the whole story done because it's a memoir and it's your story. So it already has a beginning, middle, and end. But if you're writing a book like this, they're going to want to know who your audience is, what comparable titles there are, who this book is going to help, or who your nonfiction book is going to either help or intrigue, and what are comparable titles so they know how they would sell it to publishers. So your query letter to an agent is also the sales page for them to figure out how they could noodle over it in their mind and how they would sell it to a publisher, and why you know that you are the person to write the book and that you are going to sell a bazillion copies for them. Okay, so, and to learn how to do a good query letter, if you go to gallicat.com, they have a whole bunch of both fiction and nonfiction actual query letters that got deals. So you can see kind of pattern whatever you're doing after it in articles about how to do it. Because we could do a whole course just on query letters. So you decide on who your target audience is. And then with fiction, we already said you have to have the whole thing done. But with nonfiction, you have what you want the agent to do is to ask for your book proposal that has, that's another thing you have to look up. It's very involved. A book proposal can be like 70 to 100 pages long. And a couple of sample chapters. So what you want from the query, the result of that is you want them to request your book proposal and sample chapters. If you have already done a story or short stories that were true stories, but they're already designated stories, or like Jack's book, or a novel or a memoir, then you have to have the whole manuscript. And then look up publications where your piece is a good fit. If you wrote a magazine article, look up the magazines that would be a good fit for that article, because you actually can still make a living writing articles for magazines. And I am going to share my screen one more time, new screen, because I want to show you something kind of fun. So I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but Media Bistro is a writer's site, and they help you find jobs. They help you find resource, like under the resources tab. This is how to pitch, which is what I'm in now. So this is how to pitch clean eating. Paleo and keto recipes can earn you a byline in this healthy living mag. So they tell you what they need and sign up, register. It is a membership site. There's a certain amount you get free and then a certain amount that you have to pay for. But this has a lot of things. I wanted to show this to you, Media Bistro, because it has a lot of places for, a lot of resources and things for freelancers and how to find a job. So if you want to write nonfiction, this is a great place to start getting work. Also, another thing that's important, if you want to get published in a professional, anything professional, you need what they call clips, examples. If you don't have any clips yet, this is a great site. And this is a fun site anyway, but this is a fairly new group. It's called First Gear. This is home, and they are recent posts, and you just send in a story to First Gear. They have guidelines, about us and guidelines, and contact us. And you can write a nonfiction story for them, send it in to them. They will edit it and publish it online for you. Then all of a sudden you have a clip. So, and they're fairly easy to get into for people to actually get published. And they have new stories every day. They publish new stories every day. So First Gear is a great place to go if you need clips, or even if you just want to be published again, it'd be fun. Okay, so I wanted you to see that as well. And last but not least, I guess we should talk about the art of writing nonfiction and getting published. I can go into way more depth than I can here at the 3-hour workshop, the virtual interactive online Zoom workshop. And if you're a member of the Central Oregon Writers Guild, I think it's $25 or $35 to be a member for a year. And you only have to pay $10 to take the class, or you pay $25 if you're a non-member. But if you just take a couple of things, it covers the cost. So maybe it's $25 for membership. And if that's okay, it just covers it so quickly, and it helps us pay for other things for the Guild throughout the year. Okay, so we have that. So I hope to see you soon, and I hope you learned some really valuable things. And so hopefully we'll see you Saturday the 25th at 10 o'clock in the morning. You can, go to the Central Oregon Writers Guild site and register, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye.